Hey, I'm Nikki and welcome to the Preppy Possum. Today I'm going to lead you step by step through a painting. So today we're going to paint some blue hydrangeas. So we're going to start by grabbing a little bit of light blue. And I'm just going to hop up just a smidge from the bottom of the canvas and throw a little whoop on there just for like 5 or 6 edges just to kind of get the bottom of the jar. And then once I get the bottom of the jar, I'm just going to throw a little line up for like 5 or 6 inches to get the sides of the jar. And then I'll go ahead and do a little whoop on each side. So a little whoop whoop just to add the curves to the top part because we're painting a ball jar. It's a big one. It'd be an expensive one. And then once you have both of the little whoops, then we're gonna do like a wiggly little line that just comes up for like an inch, just to kind of give the impression of threads. So just kind of wiggle it. And then we'll throw a little droopy line that connects the top left to the top right. And then once you get that, since this is acrylic and it dries pretty fast, I'll just go ahead and throw a layer of light blue through the whole jar, just to get a good base. And whenever you're doing this, just grab a lot of paint and go for it, because we'll come back and throw some more paint on there, so you won't really be able to see like all these strokes. It doesn't matter like which way your strokes go right now. And once you get the jar filled in, you don't have to wipe out your brush or anything. I'm just gonna grab a little bit darker shade of blue. It's still a light blue, a little bit darker. And now I'm gonna throw in like the base for the hydrangeas. So I'm gonna do like big bumpy circles. And you wanna go big with these. Don't be scared. So go big, do like a big bumpy circle. So I would just hop up like a smidge from the top left and throw you one. And then I would have another bloom. This one can kind of touch the lip of the jar. And I would still go really big with this one. This one can be even more like oblong kind of shaped. And then I would even throw like another one joining them at the top. And then just like we did the jar with the jar before, I would go ahead and grab like a bunch of that pool blue, like that same blue that we just threw it in on there with, and go ahead and fill them all in. Because we'll come back and dab with a bunch of different colors to make it look more like hydrangeas, like all the little petals. Okay, so once I filled in that one, then I went ahead and filled these two in with some pool blue. And now I'm gonna go ahead and grab some more of that really light blue that we started out with, so that it's really super light, almost white. And I'm gonna load my brush with a lot of paint, and then all through the bottom of all three, I'm just gonna kind of dab. So you don't wanna stab it, even if you had a bad day, just kind of barely dab it on there. So the trick is to have a whole lot of paint on your brush and just be really light with it. So I'm gonna go ahead and like dab through the bottom of all three, because that's gonna kind of help us once we add like the darks on there. You need the lights and darks to make them pop. And it's okay that the pool blue is still really wet, because they kind of mix together and it'll make it look better. It'll kind of blend in a few areas. And up here at the top, I'm just gonna kind of dab like to make it, give the impression that those two are already in front of it, because I'll come back and dab over it with some darks too. And then once you have a little bit of light going on through the middle, then I would grab like some seafoam, kind of like a bluish green, and some pool blue, and I'm just gonna throw a few little bits of that kind of through the middle. You don't wanna do like a perfect line, but just so you have some that kind of overlaps into the light and some that goes into the pool blue too. Just to kind of get a little bit of a different color through the middle. And then I'll just throw like a little bit of the seafoam and the pool blue through the bottom of the jar too, while we have it on our brush. just so we have like a few little streaks to kind of make it look more like glass, just to give that impression. And it works better since that light blue is still a little wet. Then let's grab a little bit of purple, because even the blue hydrangeas sometimes have a hint of purple. And I'm gonna throw some purple like all through the right hand side of that right flower, just because it looks good to have a little bit of that, because we'll cover some of it up. So don't worry if you're doing this at home and throw too much purple. Or some people think there never is too much purple. So, but throw just a little bit of that. And then let's go ahead and grab some turquoise. That's what's gonna make these hydrangeas pop, some turquoise and even a little bit of royal blue, so like a dark purpley blue. And we'll go ahead and throw some of that through the top of all three. That's why some of the hydrangeas are called like blueberry variety. Pretty sure, because it's like the color of a blueberry. But throw like a bunch of the dark through the top of all three. Kind of hang it out over the edge of your pool blue. And I'll do it through this one too. And like I said before, don't worry if you like cover up some of the purple. And then we'll throw a little bit of this through the bottom of the jar too, just to kind of add a little bit of dark down there. And then let's take a little break from our flowers. I'm gonna wipe that off and chunk it in the water and grab a little bit smaller brush. Now I grab like a little bit smaller brush, so like a number 4, and grab some of that dark green, and like right at the top lip of our jar, we're just gonna do a little bit, like a right hand side of a rainbow, a little whoop. And then once you have that, we'll just fill that all in between the jar and your hydrangeas. I wouldn't leave any canvas showing in between. So then once you have that all filled in with green above the lip of your jar, then we're gonna throw a few leaves on the hydrangeas. So right underneath our little hydrangea on the left, we'll start with like a little whoop, kind of like the left-hand side of a rainbow. And then I'll go ahead and bring it down for like another inch or so. And then with hydrangea leaves, they're kind of bigger towards your flower and thinner towards the edge. So you wanna keep them kind of skinny towards the ends and then just kind of fatten it up towards the flower. But don't worry if they get large and in charge, we can slim them down with the background color. And then I'd throw like a little leaf that goes over that top right-hand edge of our jar. So once you have all your little leaves on there, so I think like at least 3 is a good number, then I would go ahead and keep that dark green and just fill them all in. And just like we did with the little part where the stems are gonna go, you wanna fill it in all the way to your hydrangeas. You don't wanna leave any canvas showing in between. So just grab a bunch and go for it. And don't worry about your brush strokes, because we're gonna come back with that slimy, limey green, like a lighter green. And don't worry like how the blue got in there. It'll dry pretty quick. So you wanna get all your leaves filled in. And then once you get that, I would grab a little bit of that lighter green. So like a slimy, limey, like a yellow green, chartreusey even. And go ahead and throw kind of the impression of stems through this top part. And even though you only have 3 flowers showing, there could be like a few in the background. So I would just go ahead and throw like as many as you want. And then just skip down at least like an inch into your jar, and we'll kind of give the impression of some stems there too. So you want to skip down just a smidge where the threads would hit. And whenever you're throwing these, grab a lot of paint on your brush and then just be really light with it. That's how you'll get a good stroke. And I would make a few stems longer than others. I just think it looks like a little bit more natural that way. And then I would add a little bit of light on all your leaves. So they won't look quite as flat. That's the trick to anything, is to have some lights and some darks. So you want to make sure you have some light and dark on all your leaves. And then I would go ahead and like kind of blend it a little bit, just so you don't have like a perfect line right down the middle. And we can come back once that dries and even throw more paint on there. But that's a good start. And then once we have that, let's chunk that one in the water. And let's grab a tiny brush, so like a number 1. And you want to grab some more of that turquoise, and we're just going to kind of line the top of the jar, like where the threads would go. And you can even throw a little bit of that down like the left-hand side. And we can come back and straighten the line out too once we have some background paint on there. And then where the threads touch the jar, like right here, I would throw a little bit of a droopy line right there. And then through the top, to kind of give the impression of threads, you want to throw some more droopy lines, but these don't have to go all the way left to right. You can make these a little piecey. And I would even throw just a little bit of that turquoise at the top too. And you can even throw a little bit at the bottom, just to kind of line it. And then now grab a little bit bigger brush. So I would say like a size 8 brush is a good size, and grab some more of that slimy limey green with the dark green, and just skip up a smidge from the bottom of your jar, and we're gonna throw a little line across on both sides. And once again, don't worry too much what it looks like. You're not stuck with anything. I mean, that looks pretty even to me. And then once you get that line on there, then we'll just kind of fill in all below it. And don't worry about it being streaky, because you can come back and throw another layer. And I wouldn't worry about going like all a certain direction with your brush. So kind of just grab a lot and go for it. So I'm using the slimy limey green, like that citrusy green, with some dark green together. A little streaky, but we'll come back and throw another layer. And we're just gonna do a layer through all the big parts of our background. I wouldn't get right up next to your flowers or your leaves or your jar right away. You wanna give those another second to dry, but just get like all the big areas through the background first. And this seafoam, this color covers pretty well, so it won't leave as many brush strokes as other colors. So you won't have to worry about that. So just kind of grab a bunch and go for it any which way. So I'm just still gonna paint the background. You just wanna leave a little bit of space. So see how I'm leaving like about 1/4 of an inch around the leaves, the flowers, the jar. Paint's taking a little bit longer to dry because it rained. But yeah, so I'm just gonna grab a bunch and go for it. Even get a little bit closer up here before I switch out to a different brush, because these big brushes are good for covering a lot of ground. So then once I have that, you can carry yours over if you want to on the edges. So I'm not going to right now, but if you want to go ahead and carry it over on the sides, that way you don't have to worry about a frame. But I'm going to go ahead and wipe that one off and chunk it in the water. And then I'm going to grab a little bit smaller brush. It's like a number 6 is good. Same kind of size that we use for the flowers. and just grab more of that same color, so the seafoam. And now I'm gonna get all the way up next to everything. I would start with your jar because we started with that, so it's the most dry. So I would start with that jar and just get right up next to it. And don't worry if you like pull a little bit of turquoise or light blue into it. But once you get up next to the majority of your jar, then I would go ahead and get up next to your flowers. And how I do that is grab a bunch of that seafoam, so that background color, and load your brush with a lot of paint. And I'm just gonna kind of bump it back into the edge. But remember, like, don't stab it straight on. You just wanna kind of use the side of your brush. And you're just kind of dabbing with the side of your brush. But you want to have a bunch of paint on your brush. That's the key. And just be really light with it. So do your jar first, then the flowers. Have one more flower. And then we'll leave like the leaves and the table to last because they're the most wet. We're going to give them another second to dry. Once you're up next to those flowers, then I would go ahead and get up next to your table and your leaves. They're probably dry enough that we can get up next to those now. I'm getting all the way up next to all my leaves and the table. And I kind of like a little bit of green in there. Some people that are a little bit more particular than me, that might bother them. So you could wait for it to dry a little bit more and cover it up. But I like that look when it smears a little bit into it. Looks more painterly. Looks more like an oil rather than acrylic. And this is acrylic, so that's it'll dry pretty fast. And then once we've got up next to everything pretty good, we'll wipe that one off and chunk it in the water. You could dab a little bit more on our flowers in a second, but I'm gonna go ahead and use that teeny tiny brush again. It's like a number 1. And grab some of that turquoise. So you can write anything you want to on the jar. I'm gonna write ball. So I'll start with like a little line. And I'm gonna write it all on there with like the turquoise kind of color first, and then I'll come back and add highlights to it. And the way the old ball jars are, a lot of them are written like different ways. So some of them have the line that sweeps underneath, some of them don't. Some of them say Perfect Mason underneath it. I'm probably just gonna add a little swoop underneath. And then I'm gonna grab a little bit more of that light blue color with that same teeny tiny, and I'm gonna come back and add some highlights. So I would just add you a few little highlights. It just looks good, kind of like the glare. Oh yeah, we need a water line too. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'll skip down a little bit from the top of the jar, and I'm gonna do a little line. It can just kind of go over our stems. So you want it to droop just a little bit. And then once you get that, we'll throw one that leans up just a little bit. And this one will go behind the stems. It's just kind of giving that impression of a water line. And then once you have like your water line, your word on there, I would even grab a little bit of white and add you a few glares. So you can kind of add the glares like through the edges of the jar with a white, maybe through the top, like in between your dark layers. I would put a little bit of white, maybe even a little bit underneath those threads. And then now we can go back and touch up anything. Maybe some more dark, just because I don't know if our darks got dark enough. So some turquoise with some more of that royal blue. And I'm just gonna bump a little bit more of that in through the top of all three. And that's gonna help you kind of define those edges. It's like where we did that background, you just wanna make sure you're kind of bumping into the background a little bit to kind of define the flower. You don't want it to be like perfectly round because hydrangeas have all those little petals, and that's what you're kind of going for. So now I'll grab like that teeny tiny brush again. So I still have that teeny tiny, like a number 1. And you can use whatever color you want, but I would sign like your name or initials. And my green's still a little bit wet, but that's okay. And ta-da! Thank you so much for tuning in today. Be sure to check us out. We're on Cox Street in Asheboro. And be sure to check out our website, www.thepreppypossum.com.